On a Tuesday morning in Half Moon Bay, 4 crashed Whitfield Supercars rolled into a small independent garage on a flatbed truck. The hoods were caved in, the windshield spider-webbed, the carbon fiber panels split like dry bone. The driver handed Silas Reeve a printed order from the CEO herself. Crush them. Compact them. Send the invoice within 7 days. Silas read the chassis stamp on the first car and went very still. He had carved that number himself 4 years ago. People thought he was just a forgotten mechanic. Those 4 ruined cars had just come home to him. Half Moon Bay woke slow that morning. Mist still clung to the eucalyptus trees behind the small wooden house on Miramonte Street, and a single porch light burned against the gray. Inside, Silas Reeve poured coffee into a chipped enamel mug and slid a plate of toast across the kitchen table to his daughter. Hazel was 8, with light brown hair pulled into a crooked ponytail and a smear of strawberry jam already on her cheek. She held up her sketchbook. A red car with absurdly tall wheels filled the page. Silas studied it like a piece of evidence and pronounced it the fastest car in the county. He drove her to the elementary school on Kelly Avenue, walked her to the gate, and waited until she turned and waved before he pulled away. The drive back to the garage took less than 5 minutes. The shop sat on a side road off Highway 1, a single bay with a tin roof, a hand-painted sign that read Reeve Auto, and a yard fenced by salt-bleached cedar. He had bought it 3 years ago with cash and no questions. He unlocked the chain across the gate and stepped inside. The 4 cars were still there, where the flatbed had left them the day before, parked nose out under canvas tarps. Silas walked the row slowly. He had not slept much. His breath showed faintly in the cold air. A gull called somewhere over the bluff and got no answer. He did not touch them yet. A pickup rolled into the lot a few minutes later. Old Tom Barringer, a retired commercial fisherman who brought his truck in for oil changes and complained about everything, climbed down and squinted at the covered shapes. "Heard you're running a junkyard now, Reeve," Tom said. "4 imports, real fancy. People are talking." Silas wiped his hands on a rag and said nothing. "They saying the CEO herself drove down here," Tom continued. "Sharp tongue. Treated you like dirt. That true?" "It's a job," Silas said. "Same as any other." Tom shook his head and climbed back into his truck. "You're a strange man, Silas. Quiet as a stone. Folks around here don't know what to make of you." The pickup pulled away. Silas stood alone in the yard with 4 wrecks worth more than the entire block of houses behind his garage. He went inside, locked the office door, and opened the bottom drawer of his work desk. Beneath a stack of receipts and tax forms lay a leather notebook, the cover worn smooth from use. He set it on the desk and turned to the last entry he had written 4 years ago. The handwriting was precise, almost architectural. Cross-sections of suspension geometry filled the margins. Equations ran along the spine. Each page was signed SR in small block letters in the lower corner. The final page held only 1 line of text, in red ink. "If the 4 come back, do not destroy them. Read them." He had written it the night he resigned. He had not believed he would ever need to. Silas closed the notebook and walked back into the garage bay. He stood at the edge of the row of cars and looked at the first hood for a long time. Somewhere in the canvas-covered metal was an answer he had spent 4 years pretending not to need. Outside, the fog began to lift over the Pacific, and the light moved slowly across the floor. 60 miles north, in a glass tower on Mission Street, Adriana Whitfield was already on her second espresso. The CEO of Whitfield Motors stood at the head of a conference table on the 42nd floor, watching the city below burn orange through the morning haze. The board had been called in early. She had not slept. 3 quarterly reports lay open in front of her, each one circled in red. 4 Aurora V12 crashes in 90 days. No fatalities, but enough wrecked carbon fiber to fill a tabloid week. The press had not connected the incidents yet. They would. "Driver error," said Garrett Pell, from her right. The chief operating officer adjusted his cufflinks and smiled the smile he saved for problems he had already solved. "All 4. We pulled the telemetry, speed, weather, late braking, nothing structural." Adriana watched his face. Pell had been her father's man for 20 years. He had stayed when her father died last spring. When she stepped into the corner office at 34 with a degree in engineering and a name everyone in the industry already had an opinion about, she trusted him because trusting him was easier than the alternative. And the cars themselves? She asked, already on their way to controlled disposal. Independent yard. Off the books. Pell tapped a folder. Out-of-state inspectors will never see them. We avoid a recall window. We avoid a federal opening. We protect the brand. Which yard? Pell did not answer immediately. He flipped to a tab. A small operation in Half Moon Bay. Owner is reliable. Discreet. Takes cash. Asks nothing. Name. Reve Auto. Adriana wrote the name down. It meant nothing to her. She watched Pell's face when she wrote it, and something there flickered. A muscle near his jaw that did not relax fast enough. She made a second note beneath the first, and underlined it twice. I'll go down personally, she said. I want to watch the cars destroyed. I want to sign the certificate of disposal myself. The room went quiet. Pell's smile did not move, but his shoulders did. That isn't necessary. I think it is. The board agreed because boards always agree with a Whitfield holding 51% of the voting shares. The meeting adjourned in 12 minutes. Pell stayed behind, pretending to gather his papers. Adriana. His voice softened, fatherly. Your father trusted me to handle these things. The yard, the disposal, all of it. There's nothing for you to see. She zipped her leather portfolio closed. Then there's nothing for you to worry about. She rode the elevator down alone. In the lobby, she passed the bronze bust of her father, polished daily by a contractor who did not know whose name he was cleaning. She did not stop. Outside on the curb, her driver opened the door of a black sedan. She slid in, gave the address in Half Moon Bay, and pulled out her phone. She did not call her assistant. She called the head of internal audit, an old colleague from her engineering days. Pull every contract Garrett Pell has signed in the last 4 years, she said. Especially anything labeled disposal, salvage, or independent vendor. I want it on my desk by tonight. Adriana, that's a lot of paper. I know. She watched the bridge slide past the window. Start with Reeve Auto. The drive south took 90 minutes. Pell rode in the front passenger seat, 2 corporate lawyers in the back beside her, and a public relations contractor followed in a second car with a camera. Adriana said almost nothing the entire trip. She watched the coast unroll and the fog burn off the headlands. Reeve Auto sat at the end of a gravel turnoff. The sign was hand-painted. A weathered American flag hung limp on a pole near the office door. Adriana stepped out of the sedan, her low heels sinking slightly into the loose stone. The 4 lawyers and the camera operator fanned out behind her. The choreography was deliberate. Silas was inside the bay, wiping his hands on a shop rag. He wore a flannel shirt rolled to the forearms, jeans dark at the knees, and boots with the soles worn smooth on the inner edges. He looked up when they came in. He did not step forward. You the owner here? Adriana asked. Her voice carried in the metal space. I am. She held out a folder. One of the lawyers stepped forward and opened it for her, displaying the contract like a tray of jewelry. I need these 4 vehicles destroyed within 7 days, crushed, compacted, no salvage of parts, no resale of components, nothing. You sign here, you take the cash, you make them disappear. Silas walked over and took the folder without ceremony. He read the terms. He read them a second time. Then he looked up. Would you like to know why they crashed? He asked. The pause was almost imperceptible. Pell laughed first, a sharp, useful laugh. The lawyers smiled on cue. The contractor swung his camera up. Adriana's mouth tilted. You? Read an Aurora V12? She let the question hang. I pay 20 engineers from MIT to do that. 20 more from Stuttgart. I think your job description ends at holding the hammer. A small bell chimed at the front of the lot. Tom Berenger had returned with a friend and had stopped to watch through the chain-link fence. The friend laughed audibly. Pell stepped in smoothly. Miss Whitfield is paying for muscle, not opinions. Sign the paper. Silas folded the contract closed. He did not sign. He slid it into the back pocket of his jeans and walked, slowly, to the first covered car. He placed one open hand on the canvas tarp where it covered the hood. He closed his eyes. Adriana watched. He stood like that for perhaps 4 seconds. Then he opened his eyes and turned back to her. I'll have an answer by tomorrow morning, he said. That isn't how this works, Pell snapped. It's how it works today. Silas's voice did not rise. You leave the cars. You come back tomorrow. If you want them crushed after that, I'll crush them. Pell looked at Adriana. He expected her to bark. She did not. She studied the man in the flannel shirt for longer than was comfortable. Then she nodded once, sharply. "Tomorrow morning," she said. 8 o'clock. The convoy reversed out of the gravel lot. As her sedan pulled away, Adriana looked back through the rear window. Silas was still standing beside the first car, his hand resting on the canvas, his head slightly bowed. Mechanics did not stand like that. She filed the image away and reached for her phone. The garage stayed open past midnight. Hazel had gone to bed at 8, after a bowl of pasta and a chapter of a book about a girl detective. Silas had kissed her forehead, pulled the quilt up, and left the hallway lamp on the way she liked. Then he drove the half-mile back down to the shop and locked the door behind him. He pulled the canvas off the first Aurora. The car looked worse uncovered. The front end had folded almost symmetrically, like a paper accordion, and the driver's side door bore the parallel scrapes of a guardrail. Silas circled it twice, photographing it from every angle with an old digital camera that had no internet connection. Then he opened his tool chest. He did not dismantle the car the way a salvage yard dismantles a car. He dismantled it the way a coroner opens a body. Each bolt was loosened in sequence, each component photographed before removal. Each piece set on a long folding table he had cleaned that afternoon. The lower control arm of the front left suspension came off at 1 in the morning. He carried it under the work lamp and clamped it gently in a vise. He measured the bushing housing with a pair of digital calipers older than the shop. He measured it 3 times. The reading came back the same each time. 0.4 millimeters out of specification. The bushing inside the housing was not the original part. The part number stamped into the metal had been ground off, but the casting marks remained. Silas knew those casting marks. They belonged to a second-tier supplier in the Midwest that had been rejected from the original spec sheet because their fatigue life was 38% below the design floor. He sat on a low metal stool and stared at the part in the vise for a long time. By 4 in the morning, he had moved to the second car, same finding. The third car, the same. By the time the sun came up over the hills to the east, he had confirmed it on all 4. Same supplier, same out-of-spec part, same failure mode. The cars had not crashed. They had been engineered to crash, eventually, by whoever had signed the change order. A black sedan pulled into the gravel at 3 minutes past 8. Adriana stepped out alone. Pell had not come. She walked into the bay and stopped at the edge of the long folding table. Silas was wiping his hands on a clean rag. He did not greet her. He gestured to the table. "What am I looking at?" Adriana asked. 4 lower control arms. 4 bushings. 4 crashes. He paused. 1 decision. She bent over the table. She had grown up around cars. Her father had taught her to read a teardown before he taught her to read a balance sheet. She picked up the first bushing, turned it in the light, and her mouth tightened. "Where is the original part number?" "Ground off. The casting marks remain." She set the part down slowly. "Who supplies this?" "Kessler Industries. Cleveland. They were rejected during the prototype phase. Their fatigue life is 38% under spec." "Who would know that?" "Anyone who read the original procurement file." He met her eyes. "Anyone who signed the change order to bring them back in." Adriana was silent for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and stepped outside into the gravel lot. Through the open bay door, Silas heard her give one terse instruction to her audit director, Kessler Industries. Every contract, every signature. Today, when she came back inside, she was paler than when she had left. "You're not a mechanic," she said quietly. Silas did not answer. She did not push. Not yet. She drove back to San Francisco that afternoon with a manila envelope on the passenger seat, photographs of all 4 bushings inside, and a question she did not know how to ask without breaking something larger than her own day. The next morning, the 5th crash happened. It was on the Pacific Coast Highway just south of Carmel. The driver was Catherine Loring, wife of a sitting United States Senator from California. Her Aurora V12 had drifted left at 68 miles per hour. The left front wheel had tucked under, and the car had gone off the shoulder into a stand of cypress. She walked away with a fractured wrist and a concussion. The car was photographed by a tourist before the highway patrol arrived. The photograph reached the Associated Press within 90 minutes. By noon, Whitfield Motors stock had dropped 12%. By 2, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration had issued a preliminary inquiry letter. By 3, A senator's office in Washington had called for hearings. Garrett Pell sat in Adriana's office on the 42nd floor and spread his hands. Driver error. Loring drives like she's 20. She was speeding. We have the data. Show me the telemetry. I'll have it pulled. Now, Garrett. He hesitated. It was a small hesitation, but Adriana had been watching for it. He stepped out to make a call, and she pulled a thumb drive from her drawer. The drive contained an internal extract from the engineering archive that her audit director had recovered overnight. She knew what was on it. She had read it on the drive back from Half Moon Bay. When Pell returned, she did not mention the drive. Halt the destruction of the 4 cars in Half Moon Bay, she said. Effective immediately. I want them preserved as evidence. Pell's face did not change. His shoulders did. Adriana, that is a serious mistake. Preserving those vehicles opens us up to discovery. Right now they are private property. The second you preserve them, they become exhibits. I'm aware. At least let me handle the chain of custody. I'll have a team move them to our facility in Fremont. No. Her tone was final. They stay in Half Moon Bay. I'm assigning private security to the yard, around the clock. No one moves anything without my written order. Pell stared at her. For the first time in their working relationship, he did not bother to smile. You don't understand what you're doing. Then explain it. He did not. He left the office. Adriana watched him through the glass wall as he walked down the corridor and stepped into his own office and closed the door. Then she opened the thumb drive on her secure terminal and read the original engineering files her father had paid Silas Reeve to develop 9 years earlier. That night, in Half Moon Bay, Hazel sat on the kitchen counter while Silas heated soup on the stove. She was working on a new drawing. A second car, sleeker than the first, with 2 seats and no roof. She held it up. Daddy, did you used to make cars like this? Silas turned slowly from the stove. He looked at her drawing. A long time ago. Before you were big. Why did you stop? He stirred the soup. The pot ticked against the burner. Sometimes people who own a thing don't take care of it the right way, he said finally, and you have to step back so you don't help them break it. Hazel considered this in the serious way she considered most things, like when Maddie at school broke my colored pencils on purpose. Something like that. She nodded, satisfied, and slid down off the counter. Outside the window, a pair of headlights swept the road and kept going. Silas watched them disappear into the fog. Adriana came alone the next morning. No driver, no lawyers, no Pell. She drove the coast road herself, in an old sedan she kept in the garage at her condo, a car her father had given her when she finished her master's degree. She arrived at Reeve Auto at 6:40 in the morning. The fog was still on the ground. Silas was already inside. He had been there since 5. The long folding table had grown. 4 control arms, 4 bushings, 4 sets of brake calipers, 4 sets of steering column inputs, each component labeled in his careful block printing. The garage looked less like a shop and more like a forensic lab. She walked the length of the table without speaking. He let her. What am I looking at now? She asked finally. A pattern. Same failure point on every car. Same component, same supplier, same out-of-spec dimension. The cars didn't crash. They were going to crash. The only variable was when and where. She stopped at the end of the table. She turned. How long have you been able to read these things? He set down his rag. Longer than I've owned this shop. Where did you learn? On the job. What job? He did not answer. He pulled a folding chair from beside the desk and dragged it to the edge of the table. He gestured for her to sit. After a moment, she did. Her sleeve caught a smear of grease. She did not seem to notice. He spoke for 45 minutes. He did not speak about himself. He spoke about lateral load distribution, fatigue cycling, the resonance frequency of a control arm under variable braking inputs, and the precise reason that a 38% reduction in fatigue life will reliably produce catastrophic failure at exactly the speeds and cornering angles that wealthy drivers favor on the Pacific Coast Highway. He drew on a yellow legal pad as he spoke. The drawings filled 3 pages. When he finished, Adriana sat very still. She did not look at the drawings. She looked at his hands. My father had an engineer once, she said quietly. I never met him. He left the company the year before my father got sick. My father wouldn't speak about him. I always thought it was a personal falling out. Silas was silent. His name was Silas Reeve. He did not flinch. You are the same Silas Reeve. I am. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her voice was lower. What happened? That isn't a story for this morning. He stood and gathered the legal pad. You have a decision to make today. Trust me, or trust Pell. That's the only piece you need. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, we can talk about the rest. She rose slowly. She walked toward the door, then stopped. On the wall above the office desk, a small wooden frame held two items. A photograph of a girl with crooked pigtails and a missing front tooth. Beside it, a child's drawing in colored pencil, a red Aurora V12, unmistakable in its silhouette, with a little stick figure inside the driver's seat, and the words, "My Dad's Car," printed across the bottom in pencil. Adriana looked at the frame for a long time. She drew that? Last year. She knew? She knew her father used to make cars. She didn't know which ones. Adriana nodded. She did not say goodbye. She walked back to the sedan, sat behind the wheel for a full minute without starting the engine, and finally turned the key and pulled out onto the coast road. Silas watched the dust settle in the gravel. Then he walked back inside and made the call he had been saving for 4 years. The phone rang twice on the other end. A man's voice answered, cautious. "Jonas," Silas said. "It's me. I need the original telemetry." Jonas Tate lived in a converted boathouse in Sausalito. He had been the lead quality assurance engineer at Whitfield Motors for 11 years before he had quit, 6 months after Silas, citing health reasons that were not health reasons at all. He now consulted independently for 2 firms, one of which was a direct competitor to Whitfield. He answered the phone because he had been waiting 4 years for that call. "How bad?" Jonas asked. 4 cars. 5th one yesterday. The federal regulators are already moving. Kessler bushings? Confirmed. Casting marks intact, Jonas exhaled. "I have what you need. I never deleted it. I copied it the week before I left. Will you give it to me?" A long pause. "If I do, I lose the consulting contract with Bridgewater Motors. Non-compete clause that triggers on any public testimony involving Whitfield." "I know. I should have done it 4 years ago anyway. I'll have the spectrographic analysis ready by morning. Tell me when you need it submitted." "Tomorrow." "Then tomorrow it is." The line went dead. Silas set the phone down and looked at the calendar on the office wall. That same afternoon, Adriana sat in her father's old study on Pacific Heights. The house had been empty for 9 months. The dust covers were still on the furniture. She had not been able to bring herself to open the safe in the wall behind the bookshelf. She did it now. Inside were 3 folders. 2 were tax records. The third was unlabeled. She opened it on the leather-top desk her father had bought when she was 16. The first document was a non-disclosure agreement, dated 4 years and 2 months earlier, signed by her father and a man named Silas Reeve. The second was a letter of resignation, dated 3 days after that. The third was a cashier's check for $1,400,000, made out to Silas Reeve, never cashed, never voided, paper clipped to the back of the resignation letter. The fourth was a patent assignment agreement, listing 3 United States patents related to multi-link suspension geometry. In the section labeled Consideration Received, the line was blank. The signature line on the assignee side was also blank. No one at Whitfield Motors had ever signed it. The patents had never been legally transferred. Adriana read the documents twice. Then she sat back in her father's chair and put her hands over her face. Across the bay, Jonas Tate ran a spectrographic analysis on the small piece of metal Silas had mailed him in a padded envelope 2 days earlier. The results came up in 17 minutes. He printed them, sealed them in a manila folder, and prepared the cover letter for the federal regulators. In a tower in San Francisco, Garrett Pell received a call from a contact inside the audit department. He listened for 90 seconds. Then he hung up and dialed a private number that did not appear on any company directory. "Send a team," he said. "Tonight. The yard in Half Moon Bay. I want those 4 cars on a flatbed before sunrise. And the owner? Pay him. Threaten him. I don't care. Just move the cars." He set the phone down and walked to his window. The bay glittered below him in the late afternoon light. He did not know that Adriana had already ordered 4 armed security contractors to surround Reeve Auto 24 hours a day, beginning at 4 o'clock that afternoon. He also did not know that the lead contractor was a former federal agent who had served under Adriana's late father on a separate matter, and whose loyalty was not for sale. The 2 trucks Pell had hired arrived at Reeve Auto at 3:40 in the morning. They were stopped at the gate by 4 men with sidearms and a court order. The driver of the lead truck made a single phone call and turned the convoy around. The emergency board meeting was called for 9 the following morning. Adriana sent the agenda at 6. One item on it, Aurora 5:12 safety review. Attendance mandatory. One additional name was added to the guest list at the bottom of the page, Silas Reeve, independent technical consultant. Pell read the email at 6:12. He read it again at 6:14. He went to the gym for 40 minutes and came back composed. Silas arrived in the lobby at 8:45. He wore the same flannel shirt, washed but not pressed, the same jeans, the same boots. He carried a leather notebook and a laptop in a canvas messenger bag. The receptionist did not know what to do with him. Adriana came down personally and signed him in. In the boardroom, 12 faces turned when the door opened. The chief financial officer raised an eyebrow. 2 outside directors exchanged a look. "Are we hiring out of the body shop now?" Pell said, loud enough for the room. "Creative." Silas set the laptop on the long table. He did not respond. Adriana stood at the head of the table. "Garrett, sit down." He sat. Silas opened the laptop. The boardroom screen lit up. He had spent the previous night with Adriana's audit director, retrieving file fragments that Pell had thought were deleted. The first slide was a side-by-side comparison of 2 engineering schematics. On the left, the original Aurora V12 front suspension geometry. On the right, the version currently in production. The difference was a single component, highlighted in red, the lower control arm bushing, Silas said. On the original spec, this part was sourced from Brennan Precision in Michigan. Fatigue life rated to 1.2 million cycles. On the production spec, this part is sourced from Kessler Industries in Cleveland. Fatigue life rated to 740,000 cycles, 38% reduction. Cost savings per car, $71 and change. Estimated annual savings at current volume, approximately $4.1 million. He clicked to the next slide. Photographs of the 4 bushings from the Half Moon Bay garage laid out on the folding table. Casting marks circled in red. Next to them, a photograph of the bushing from the 5th crash recovered from the highway patrol impound that morning. Same casting marks. The 4 cars at my shop were not victims of driver error. Neither was the 5th. They failed at a known weakness, on a known timeline. The only question was who would be inside them when they failed. The chief financial officer leaned forward. "Mr. Reeve, who authorized the change order on this component?" Silas clicked again. A document filled the screen. A change order request, dated 3 years and 4 months earlier, signed by Garrett Pell. Beneath it, a cost savings memo, also signed by Pell, with a handwritten note in the margin. "Push it through. SR will not be reviewing." The room went very still. Pell stood up. He was still smiling, but the smile had gone thin. "This is a setup. He's a disgruntled former employee with a personal grudge. Any first-year lawyer will tear this apart." Silas did not look at him. He clicked to the final slide. 3 patent numbers, all current, all listed at the United States Patent and Trademark Office, all under the name Silas Reeve, issued 9, 8, and 7 years ago, never legally assigned to Whitfield Motors. Currently in active use on every Aurora V12 in production. "For the past 4 years, Silas said quietly, "this company has been manufacturing and selling a vehicle that depends on 3 patents it does not legally own. The man who never signed the assignment is sitting in this room. The man who deleted his name from your system to hide that fact is also sitting in this room." He closed the laptop. The silence that followed was the kind of silence a room makes when 12 people understand, simultaneously, that the next sentence anyone speaks will change their lives. Pell pulled out his phone and began to dial. Adriana, still standing, said one word, "Don't." Pell did not stop dialing. He turned slightly toward the window and held the phone to his ear. The call connected for 2 seconds before 2 of the security contractors Adriana had assigned to the building stepped into the boardroom and stood near the door. Pell saw them and lowered the phone. "Garrett," Adriana said, The truck you called 4 nights ago to move the cars from Half Moon Bay was stopped at the gate. The driver is cooperating with our internal investigators. Everything in the back of that truck is now logged into evidence, including the 2 boxes from your office that were already loaded. Pell's face did the small thing faces do when an exit they had counted on closes. What boxes? The handwritten ones, 4 years of them. He sat down. The boardroom waited. Adriana looked at Silas. Silas nodded slightly. She turned back to the table. 2 hours ago, an independent engineering firm in Sausalito submitted a sealed analysis to the federal regulators regarding the Kessler bushing. The analysis confirms what Mr. Reeve has shown us. The author, Jonas Tate, has agreed to testify. There is also one Aurora V12 scheduled for a private press demonstration next week. According to internal records, that car was built to the original specification, with the Brennan bushing, because the press team requested factory tolerances. Garrett had filed paperwork yesterday to have it pulled and crushed before delivery. The paperwork is in those same boxes. The chief financial officer closed her eyes. The 2 outside directors began to whisper. Pell stood up one more time. His face had gone the color of bone. He looked at Silas across the table and said, with the last of his composure stripped away, "You think you won this? You're a mechanic in a coastal town with a kid and a leaky roof. You'll be back in that garage by Friday." Silas looked at him for the first time since the meeting had started. When he spoke, his voice did not rise. It did not need to. "I don't need to win," he said. "I just need those 4 cars left intact, so they can speak for themselves." The room did not move. The 2 contractors stepped forward. Pell did not resist. He set his phone on the table and walked between them out into the corridor. The door closed behind him. For perhaps 15 seconds, no one in the boardroom spoke. Adriana finally sat down. She set both palms flat on the table and looked at her board. "I am calling for a forensic audit of the past 4 fiscal years," she said, "effective immediately. Mr. Reeve will consult on the engineering side. Outside counsel will be retained to advise on the patent matter. We will self-report to the federal regulators before the end of business today. We will announce a voluntary recall of every Aurora V12 currently in service tomorrow morning. We will set aside a reserve to cover the recall, the patent settlement, and the criminal cooperation. Estimated cost, $60 to $80 million, the chief financial officer said. The stock will drop another 15%. "It will recover," Adriana said. "It will not recover if we do this any other way." The room voted in 20 minutes. The recall went public the following morning. Pell was indicted within a week on charges including wire fraud, securities fraud, and reckless endangerment. The senator from California publicly thanked Whitfield Motors for its transparency, which surprised exactly no one who had been in the room. That afternoon, a payment of $2,700,000 was wired to the personal account of Silas Reeve. The line items were broken out on the statement: $1,400,000 for the unpaid resignation severance from 4 years prior, $800,000 for retroactive patent licensing on the 3 suspension patents, calculated at industry standard rates for the period of unauthorized use, $500,000 for forensic engineering consulting on the recovery of the 4 crashed vehicles. Silas stared at the statement for a long time before he closed the banking app. Then he drove home and made his daughter pancakes. Saturday in Half Moon Bay was cool and bright. The fog had lifted by 10. A light wind moved off the Pacific and dried the gravel in the yard. Somewhere out past the breakers a fishing boat hauled its lines, and the gulls argued over what was left. Silas sat on the wooden step outside the office, drinking coffee from the same chipped enamel mug, watching Hazel work on a new drawing on the small camp table he had set up in the shade. The garage was almost empty. The 4 Aurora V12s had been moved 3 days earlier, sealed and crated, to a federal evidence facility in Sacramento. The yard looked larger without them. It also looked quieter. A black sedan turned into the gravel just past noon. Silas did not need to look to know whose it was. Adriana stepped out wearing a charcoal sweater, jeans, and flat boots. No portfolio. She carried 2 paper cups of coffee from the small bakery in town. She paused at the edge of the gravel, as if waiting to be invited closer. Silas tilted his head toward the empty step beside him. She came over and sat. She handed him a cup. He took it without comment. Hazel looked up from her drawing. Hi, Adriana said. I'm Adriana. I know. my dad said. Adriana glanced at Silas. He kept his eyes on the road. Hazel slid down off her bench and brought her drawing over. It was a car, a clean two-seater, no roof, sleek lines, the kind of car Silas had drawn in the margins of his notebook 100 times. On the driver's side, a small label in colored pencil read DAD. On the passenger side, a second label, in the same hand, read her. Hazel set the drawing in Adriana's lap. Adriana did not speak for several seconds. She traced the edge of the paper with one finger. Then she folded the drawing carefully and slipped it into her coat pocket. Thank you, Hazel. You can keep it. I'd like to. Hazel returned to her camp table. Adriana turned to Silas. She reached into her bag and withdrew a single envelope. She set it on the step between them. This isn't a contract. It isn't a settlement. The settlement is already paid. Silas looked at the envelope. It's an offer. A separate research and development division of Whitfield Motors, based here on the coast. Half Moon Bay, or Pacifica, or wherever you want it. You run the engineering. You report to me, no one else. You don't have to move. You don't have to wear a tie. The patents stay in your name. The work is yours. He did not pick up the envelope. I don't expect an answer today. I don't expect an answer this month. I owe you a choice. My father didn't give you one. I want to. He set down his coffee. He looked out at the road, at the empty yard, at the silhouette of his daughter bent over her drawing in the late morning sun. I'll think about it, he said. Adriana stood. She brushed gravel off her jeans. Next week, he added, without looking at her, come by. Hazel's making cookies. Adriana paused. She nodded, more to herself than to him. Then she walked back across the gravel to the sedan. She did not look over her shoulder to see who was watching. For the first time in a long time, she did not need to. Neither of them had been looking for this. But 4 crashed cars had found their way to the only man who could read them, and to the only woman willing to listen.